Welcome, Principal Matters podcast listeners. This is episode 478, and I'm here with my co-host. Hi, Will.
Hi, Jen. It's great to be with you.
It's great to be with you. You know, you and I record episodes several months in advance, and I have been waiting for this episode. This is with my friend, Dr. Greg Johnson. Fun fact, my childhood best friend is Dr. Johnson's wife. So we have known each other for a very, very, very long time. And I was in his wedding, and he is going to tell you a story about surviving a school shooting. And this is an interview. Well, I remember texting you afterwards and saying, I'm so sorry. It's so long. I could not stop. So, and you said, it's okay. It's good stuff. So
I think you also told me in that text, it's one of the few times you had a hard time controlling your own emotions.
I did. I cried during this interview. It was really profound and disturbing and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful as well. So before we get into that interview, let's do our quick 5-minute Q&A. This is a fan favorite, so we're going to keep doing it. Here's the question, Will, and you have to go first because I introduced us to this question. So it's your turn.
You got it.
How can we build and sustain trust with our staff, students, and parents?
I'm going to use an equation that has been so helpful for me whenever I revisit this question, because this question comes up so often in all of our work. And years ago, I had a leader that just said to me, Will, time spent equals relationships built. And at the time, I think he was trying to remind me that I was doing a lot of tasks and maybe even playing the role of leadership. I was checking off all the boxes, but maybe not really spending time with the people that I'm actually serving. And for me, if I'm going to build trust and sustain it with my teachers, my staff, my students, my community, I got to be with them. Mm-hmm. It's just that simple. It's not any different for your family. It's not any different for the people you work with. Do they know me? Do they know the names of my kids? Do I know their kids and what the interests they have? Do I care about those things? But I'd start there, Jen.
Right. I feel very strongly about this topic, and it won't be any surprise. I wrote a whole book about this. This whole thing is how you build trust. But, just this last week, I saw a post, I believe it was from Dr. Brad Johnson, and he said something that really summarized it for me. And that is, from a principal lens, if you have built that relationship with someone, if you've put in that time and you give feedback, it feels like support. If you have not, it feels like an attack. And I think that's really important for principals to think about. We want to give feedback to people. We want them to be better. But if we just come out blowing out of left field and say, you need to do this better and this better and this better, it's going to feel like an attack. But if we have that relationship, we won't approach it that aggressively and without care to the person's reception of it. We'll know better, and it will be perceived as support. So that's trust to me.
I love that. Well, I'll say one other thing, just because I know we only have 5 minutes. And that is, there was a really practical suggestion that came out in a recent interview we released with Bo Brannon, principal of Union High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Jen, 3,500 kids, large admin team. And he told me that each year he and his admin team will take their teachers, put them on a spreadsheet, and they'll go through and highlight who has the best relationships with whom. How deeply do you know them? How surface is it? And then they'll kind of color code it and assign each other intentional times to go connect with these teachers to make sure we're building deeper relationships. And I thought, they're doing with their data what teachers do with student learning. They're doing that with their own teachers. And I was like, that is just so brilliant. So if you want a strategy for building trust, then maybe you're one of those. I'm not that scientific, but my friend Bo is. He loves numbers. So maybe that would help if you want to just take time to when's the last time you went through your list of teachers and went, oh my gosh, it's been a month since we've had a deep conversation. Go see them and just reconnect. Because you're right, Jen. They're going to be so much more willing to do the hard thing when they know you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
all right, friend.
All right, everybody, stay tuned for this incredible episode with Dr. Greg Johnson.
Thanks, Jen. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but how do you actually get the right results and know the best next steps? The secret is iExcel. iExcel helps you easily assess performance and determines the best path forward for each student. Whether you need data for benchmarking or intervention planning, iExcel can do it all. And iExcel doesn't stop at assessments. It also provides you with everything else your school needs, from a standards-aligned K-12 curriculum to actionable analytics. iExcel's online learning and teaching platform is research proven to improve student outcomes, and it's used by 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts. If you want to start driving real progress, get started today at iexcel.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Welcome, Principal Matters podcast listeners. This is Dr. Jen Schwanke here with you today, and I just can't believe my guest today. This is a series of coincidence, serendipity, whatever, that brought you, Greg Johnson, and myself together, not only as friends, but as colleagues. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's so many things that we want to talk about. And before recording, I told Greg that we try to keep episodes between 30 and 35 minutes. I think we might struggle with that today, but we're just going to see what happens. So he's here for it. So let me start, listeners, by telling you who Greg is. Yes, he is a personal friend of mine in a story that goes back to when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I met Greg's now wife. She grew up in the small town where I grew up, and then she went on to meet Greg in college, and they got married and have a wonderful family, and we're still dear friends. But that's not why you're on the show today, Greg. Greg is the high school principal of West Liberty-Salem High School in West Liberty, Ohio. He was first a middle school social studies teacher in 1997, and then just completed his 20th year of principalship, marking his 28th year in education, all at the same school. Greg enjoys the small rural setting and appreciates the family atmosphere and the collaborative spirit of a K-12 building. Greg also serves on the NASSP Board of Directors. His involvement with NASSP can be traced back to a school shooting event that he and his school experienced in 2017. Excuse me. Sorry about that. This event and the extensive recovery period that followed led to Greg's involvement in the establishment of the NASSP Principal Recovery Network in 2019. While serving as a co-facilitator of this group, Greg has gained a deeper understanding of the vision, mission, and work of NASSP, and so he joined the board of directors in 2024. Sharing his experience in educating others about school leadership during and after a shooting, as well as the long, difficult road of recovery, has been a passion of Greg's since the event in 2017. This passion has allowed him to speak at conferences across the country, often accompanied by his wife, 3 children, and son-in-law. All members of his family were in the school on the day of the shooting, and each has experienced the event and its aftermath differently. And so I want our listeners to think about that. You know, you've got the principal, but you have every single family member in that building, Crystal as a teacher, and your children attending the school. And so because of that, Greg brings a very unique, thoughtful, authentic, and compassionate approach to speaking on school safety, as well as his work as a school leader. So, Greg, I told you I was going to read the long version of your story. You're going to fill in that story, though, with what it was really like, not only on that day, but leading a rural district for 20 years. So that's a lot. So again, welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen.
So tell us about your journey to becoming principal at West Liberty-Salem High School. We get a lot of people listening who are who aspired to be a principal. So how'd you start your education career, and what drew you to leadership in education?
So I went to a small rural school. It actually borders my current school. It's called Triad. So I graduated from Triad High School, followed my older brother and my parents, and went off to Ohio State. We've got a little bit of a family legacy going on at Ohio State that we've passed down to the next generation. And actually, when I started at Ohio State, I started in engineering. And to be honest, my my thought was, hey, I'm a smart guy. I'm too smart to be a teacher. I need to make more money than that. But engineering was not where my passion was, and I realized that pretty quickly in classes. And I had a mentor who was a teacher and coach, Mr. Slayball, who just made a big difference in my life and in the lives of the other guys on our teams. And so I kind of always had this pull to be a teacher. And once I got to Ohio State and realized I was enjoying my history classes, and decided that was the way to go. So I switched to education, started volunteering as a coach at Upper Arlington. As soon as I first got into some of those classrooms as a student at Ohio State, I realized, yeah, that's definitely what I want to do. So I started teaching right out of the gate at a small rural school, West Liberty-Salem. And just loved it. Just loved every part of it as a junior high teacher. I had 7th and 8th graders. I coached 7th and 8th grade basketball during those years. It was a small school. We're all in one building. Our preschoolers all the way through our seniors, even our central office, we're all under one roof. And I didn't have that exact experience at Triad. We were broke up into small buildings, but just really felt a great fit here at West Liberty-Salem as soon as I started. And really enjoyed teaching. Probably would have stayed teaching for a long time. But during my first 7 years in the building, my 7 years as a teacher, I had 5 different principals. So it was kind of a revolving door. Good people left for different reasons, and really felt like my school needed some consistency. So another kind of mentor of mine, Steve Thompson, was a high school principal, and he kind of saw some things in me and, gave me that tap on the shoulder and said, hey, we're going to create a new position. It's a dean of students. I think you'd be great for it. It's a good way for you to get a feel for this thing called administration. So I did that for a year. At the end of that year, Steve moved from principal to superintendent, and I applied for the principal's job. So again, that was 20 years ago. And I will say, at this part of my career, like there are definitely times where I think, man, I wish I would have taught longer, because I loved teaching and I loved it every day. I enjoy and appreciate being a principal, but I don't enjoy it every day. As there are lots of days where it's not fun, and I felt like I was able to make the teaching part fun every day. So I do, like, for the last 20 years, I've missed that, and as I've reflected, I thought, man, maybe I should have stayed in the classroom a little bit longer. But I think it was really what our school needed. And for my family, the timing was great, because when I became an administrator, my wife, who was also a teacher, she was able to stay home with our kids for the next 7 years. So that worked out well too. Right. So that's kind of how I got into it. And when I can remember when I interviewed to be the principal here, I said, listen, I'll sign a lifetime contract if you want me to. Like, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to raise my kids. I'm not ever going to leave. And that's held true.
Right. Well, and I remember, this isn't part of the questions that I had prepared, but I remember you and Crystal had either just been married or were about to get married, and you were serving as a building rep for the association in your district, and so was I. And I wonder a lot, I was actually talking to our association president yesterday and thinking about how powerful it is as an administrator to really, truly understand that teacher experience, and to have needed to fight for the teacher experience too before becoming an administrator. So tell me a little about that, about loving teaching and advocating for that teacher experience.
Yeah, I think it's a little unique in our district, but to be a middle school teacher, but to get to work with elementary teachers, to get to work with high school teachers, and to see the challenges of that revolving door of administration, like that was hard. But yeah, I was involved in our association, also, part of the building leadership team, district leadership team. And so, definitely got that appreciation for teachers, but also that's part of the challenge too. When you go to become an administrator in your same building, like those relationships change, and that was difficult. And, I would say I still have, we've had a lot of continuity across the building, across the district. So a lot of those teachers have moved on. They're no longer here or have retired. But some of my good friends were teachers with me then, and are teachers still. And our relationship has definitely changed. I mean, it's different when you're the principal. But I think in our building, we've been able to maintain that we're all on the same team. It's not us versus them that I think you get sometimes.
Right, exactly. And such a gift to not have it be us versus them. So, being a principal, as we all know, is a demanding role even on the best of days. In a rural community, it can be especially demanding because you're the guy, right? Lack of support for specialized services. So, what are some of the aspects of your job in a rural community that you find most fulfilling? And what are the things that are more challenging?
I think most fulfilling is just that I get to know all the kids. In many cases, I have a good idea of who they are before they even get into my building. Because, like I said, my building, meaning into the high
Right,
school. Because I've seen them grow up in elementary. I maybe haven't put faces with names yet,
right,
but maybe in middle school I do. Also, I mean, a lot of just the family connections, like
right,
especially as my kids were coming up through school, from helping coach youth basketball and baseball and soccer, and my wife coaching, like, and just knowing our kids and their friends and the kids a year or two older and a year or two younger. Like, we had a lot of those
right,
relationships before. Just a quick example of just that part of being a dad and a principal. I can remember, like, my daughter, our oldest, was in middle school, and she had a birthday party, and she invited girls over to spend the night. And one girl was new to the school that year. And the next morning, I'm making pancakes, and the girl who's new kept, like, talking to some of her friends and asking questions. And it turns out she was asking, like, "Why is our principal making pancakes?" And they're like, "That's Addie's dad." She's like, "What? I didn't know that." So I think that there have definitely been, we could do a whole podcast on the challenges that my kids experienced.
Right.
But there are definitely those benefits of raising kids in the same building as where we are. So I think in that small school, you get to know the families, the students, and that's a big benefit. But then the challenge, like you said, it's every principal has lots of hats to wear, or
Right.
lots of plates to keep spinning. I use that analogy a lot. Lots of plates to keep spinning.
Right.
And there aren't very many people to help
Right.
with that. And so for my first 16 years as principal, I was actually the middle school and high school principal. So I was grades 6 through 12. And we had an elementary principal who was grades K through 5. But then we had an assistant who
Right.
was an assistant K through 12. So during those years, like, there were definitely some advantages of having somebody to step in. Several years ago, 4 years ago, we transitioned that person into a middle school principal. So now I have a middle school principal. I'm only 9 through 12, but I don't have that assistant anymore.
Right.
And I've noticed that difference in the last 4 years. Like, it's a challenge because, there's no opportunity, to play good cop, bad cop. I have to be
Right.
both. I'm both the good cop and the bad cop. I'd say as over the last 10 or 12 years, I think it was a little easier doing some of those after school activities because I was there as a dad also. Like,
Right.
it's not a big deal to go to every basketball game because I'm watching my son or my
Right.
daughter out there too. Going into this coming year, like, I think it'll be different because
Yeah.
it'll be just me as the principal and not as a dad.
Right.
It might make it easier in some ways too.
Right, exactly, because you don't have to watch both as a dad, because
Yeah.
all three of your kids were very involved athletes, and so I remember. Well, side note, you guys, Dr. Johnson, Greg, and I went through Ohio State and got our doctorates at the same time, and I distinctly remember, Greg, some classes where you would be logged in to if they were on Zoom, you'd be like in a locker room. And if we took a break, you'd run out and watch one of your kids play basketball for a little bit and then come back in. So
Yeah.
you definitely have to make it work, however that happens. So let's talk about the experience that your school faced in 2017. And again, this is something no principal ever imagines enduring. So to the extent that you're comfortable sharing it, walk us through the moments that happened that day and how it unfolded.
Yeah, no problem. And I found over the years, originally I didn't talk about it much, and I found over the years that talking about it, sharing our story can be very helpful. So I'm very comfortable
Good.
sharing
Okay.
then with you about this, and I know we've
Yep.
talked about it many times. But
Yep.
I mean, every school says this is the last place you would have ever thought it would happen, and I
Right.
think that 100% applies to our school. And there was nothing leading up to it. It really, 100% came out of the blue. So it was a Friday morning in January 20th, 2017. It was actually inauguration day for President Trump in his first term. And our day started like a normal day. I think, as most of our listeners will be able to relate to, I was standing there talking to my secretary because I was about 4 subs short to get through the day. I had every class covered with somebody, but we didn't have enough subs for the day. And while I was standing there, the secretary, a call came in to the elementary secretary that we had a shooting in the high school. And it was kind of a, I could picture her face. She looked at me and said, "Greg, we have a shooting in the high school wing." And I thought that there's no way. That doesn't make any sense. We were still in the middle of towards the end of a construction project. We kind of did a full building remodel. So we had guests in the building for that reason. Construction workers were still there. And with that means equipment and stuff like that. So in my mind, I was hoping that the report coming was false, was inaccurate. But I remember I grabbed my radio. I told the secretary, I said, "Go ahead and make that announcement that we've got a shooting in the high school wing, active shooter in the high school wing." And I grabbed my radio and ran down there to try to figure out what was going on. As I got closer, the place was empty. The place was quiet. Our building's not that big, but I hadn't heard whatever the commotion was. And as I got to the wing, and my assistant principal, Andy, joined me, like we could see a backpack in the hallway, and that was it. But as we got closer, you could actually see shell casings on the floor outside the bathroom. And we got closer, you could hear voices in the bathroom. And again, I think at this point, we're still just investigating. We're trying to figure out what's going on. But as we got close to the bathroom, you could hear a student in there, and it turned out to be a student named Logan. And he was saying things like, "Hey, it's okay. Just put the gun down. Just put the gun down. You haven't killed anybody. Hey, it's okay. Put the gun down." So because we could both hear that, like we knew you've got at least 2 students in there. One's holding the gun, the other one's not. And we kind of we didn't have time to talk about it. We instinctively put our hands up as we walked in and said, "Hey guys, we're coming in to talk. Hey, let's relax. We're going to come in and talk about this." So that's how we, I guess, became engaged with what was going on in the bathroom. So when we walked in there, we discovered Logan on the floor. He had been shot. He'd actually been shot twice by a shotgun. So another student, both juniors, another student had for some reason, still don't really know the reason why, had brought a shotgun to school that day. He had disassembled it the night before so that he could put it in a backpack. He had a backpack full of ammunition, and he had gotten into the building a little bit early, went into the bathroom so that he had time to reassemble everything, was preparing to do something for him. And before he had a chance, Logan had just happened to walk into the bathroom to check his hair, and kind of instinctively, the other student pulled the trigger, shot Logan once in the front. That spun Logan around, shot him again a second time in the back. But I think Logan walking in just really threw the other student off. He had a plan. I don't know who the targets were, but he had a plan that day, and his plan was foiled a little bit when Logan walked in. When we walked in, Logan was on the floor, slumped against the wall, but still conscious. And he had talked the student into not going back out into the hallway and firing more shots. He was trying to talk the student into putting the gun down to get help. When we walked in, Andy, the assistant principal, said to Logan, he said, "Hey, what happened?" And Logan said, "He shot me." Well, the other student heard Andy's voice and immediately said, "I'm sorry, coach." We couldn't see the other student. He was in the back stall at the time, but he put the gun on the ground and slid it underneath the stall door. He had been a football player and a wrestler, and Andy was a coach for both. So they had that relationship. And I think that obviously made a huge deal. So then from that point on, the shooter had then laid down on the floor, gave himself up completely. So from that point on, like that situation to some degree was under control. We had a shooter, we had a victim, we had a gun. But it really, it's everything that happened after that too.
Right. Well, that's Greg. I've heard you tell this story before. I've heard this story sitting at your island or at your counter in your kitchen. Every time I hear it, I have a physical reaction. Just the shock of of my, my best friend teaching fourth grade in that building, all of your children in that building, you going into that restroom, seeing Logan shot, you said we still don't know why the shooter did it, which, opens up such a layer of complexity and about kids and decisions and planning. And, then, even though the gun is on the floor and even though he said, "I'm sorry, coach," like how heartbreaking, you still have a victim, you still have a school full of kids. And so what did you do? Did you evacuate? What
Well,
did you do next?
so, looking back, I don't understand why I left, but Andy said, "Go get help. I've got this." So I had the radio with me, but I still left. I walked out of the restroom, ran down the hallway, and then realized, like, wait, I've got my radio on me. So I called. I said, I called on the radio. We've got a student who's been shot. We need the nurse in the high school boys' restroom as soon as possible. Um, and then the elementary principal found me and asked what he could do. I said, call 911. Hopefully somebody's here. Go out front and meet them. I said, "You've got an injured student." I actually ran into our athletic director in the hallway, and he was also an EMT. So I took Jake with me back to the restroom so that he could start providing first aid until the nurse got there. And that's kind of while I was out there in the hallway and then working my way back to the restroom. That's when I, started realizing, like, there's nobody in the building. Like,
Right.
the high school wing had evacuated. And we happen to be an Alice trained school. And I've always, said ever since, like, one of the beauties of Alice, or one of the most powerful things of that training, is it empowered our students and our teachers to make decisions based on the information that was presented to them. So yes, I'd say all but about 4 rooms in the high school evacuated through the windows and left the building, but not because they were told to. Nobody waited for an announcement. And actually, when I looked back, kind of weird, but a couple of days later, watching our security cameras all at the same time and writing things down, I realized, like, those classrooms evacuated 2 minutes before the phone call was made to the office. Like, they didn't wait on somebody to tell them there's a shooting. They heard, they knew, and they did. So the next thing I did is I called Logan's parents. I knew that the squad was on the way, but so we had been good friends even before this. Actually, I'm a recovered horse owner, speaking to a current horse owner. Our kids showed horses in the fair, and our oldest daughter, she happened to keep her horse at Logan's house. They've got a farm with a nice horse barn and pasture, and that's where our horse was. So I'd actually been at Logan's house that morning to do chores. So I thought, I need to let Ryan and Julie know. So I've got both their numbers on my phone. Obviously, we're good friends. I called Ryan, no answer. I called Julie, she answered, and I told her, I said, "Julie, I need you to listen carefully. We've had a shooting at school. Logan's been shot. You need to get here as quickly and safely as you can." And I can remember her asking, "Greg, is he okay? Is he going to make it?" And I said, "Julie, I was just talking to him and he was talking to me, but you need to get here quickly." So I went back in and then I got a phone call from a teacher. I can remember saying, "Hey, I'm with these kids. We're at this farmhouse." And then I started looking in rooms and realized the rooms were empty. Now, there was a room directly across from the restroom where the shooter had shot 2 shots into the door and kind of, as a shotgun works, kind of blew the door to pieces. So that teacher decided we're hunkering down. We're going to stay in the classrooms. There were a couple classrooms that didn't evacuate, but barricaded for those reasons. But then it became, as the squad's coming in, and we've got fire and EMTs and state highway patrol and local law enforcement showing up, and then it's starting to reach out to, because of where we are, you can't, like, evacuate and go to this other school. So we had kids who, I think I counted over 300 kids who evacuated and just completely scattered, running across muddy cornfields. I talked to our oldest was a sophomore at the time. She was in that wing, just 2 classrooms down from the boys' restroom. When she tells her story, she talks about how it was actually her teacher's the one that called the elementary secretary because it was his wife. No other teacher made that phone call because they were busy dealing with what was happening. So that classroom decided, hey, let's barricade the door. the teacher called the elementary secretary, his wife, to let her know. And then he asked the kids, like, do you want to barricade or do you want to leave? And they said, let's leave.
Right.
And the windows at the time, we were, like I said, in the middle of a construction project. They only opened about 8 inches. We're all one floor, which is helpful.
Right.
But a couple of the football players broke the windows and helped everybody out. And, so Addie jumped out that window.
Right.
And she ended up going about a mile and a half through muddy cornfields to a farmhouse because one of the girls in her class said, hey, my aunt and uncle's house is right there. Let's go there. And remember, Addie tells the story, as she was running to the farmhouse, she called her grandpa. And he asked, why are you, did you call your parents? She said, no, they're both inside. I don't know. Right. I don't want, if they're hiding from the shooter, I don't want him to hear their phone ring. So,
right.
Those were the thoughts going through. And something that I realized much later is that, when you talk about trauma, and I'm sure we'll talk more about recovery, but when you talk about trauma, for me, I had the unknown as I was walking down the hallway and going into the bathroom, and then it became known. And that traumatic event, even though the recovery was still to come, that traumatic event was over when I saw, okay, the gun is on the ground. We've got an injured student. But for those students who were evacuating, like, they went 30, 45 minutes, an hour thinking everybody who didn't get out is dead.
Right.
Not knowing. And even when they get the good news later that nobody died, like, you can't undo that traumatic event that happened inside their brain and happened inside their body. So I think I've always said I completely underestimated the traumatic impact that event would have on our students and our staff and our community.
When I think about Addie calling her grandfather, thinking her dad, her mom, her brother, and her sister are still in that building.
Yeah.
And she's running on a January day in Ohio across a cornfield. Yeah, your body doesn't forget that. Your mind doesn't forget that. And for the community, I'm thinking about that aunt and uncle, the knocking on the door, can we come in? There's been a shooting. Like, your community is so tight knit. And, even as you tell this story, Greg, the teacher's wife was in the office, the aunt and uncle are across the cornfield. Like, there's so many deep connections there. The Logan's parents were your dear friends, and you have to call her and tell her son's been shot. And so, do you feel like as you began to lead through not only the events of that day, but going forward, how did that community connection make it both more challenging, but also easier? Because I can imagine you were thinking of people and faces that you see at church, that you see at, how was that to navigate? Or did you just flip into leader mode? How did that go for you?
I think both. I think like, as it's going on, I started getting phone calls from parents like, Greg, I hear there's a shooting. Is my kid okay?
Right.
And I got, I don't know, a dozen or more of those. So I tried to answer everyone as I'm talking to law enforcement, as I'm trying to coordinate. Okay, we decided it was safe to bring the kids back into the school. Let's get all the elementary, we'll keep them in their classrooms, but high school and middle school, we're going to get them all to the gym, because we hadn't taken attendance yet, Jen. This happened before first period. I mean, for 2 minutes after the first bell rang to start first period. So when you talk about accountability, we didn't know even who was absent that day yet. So let's get all the high school and middle school in the big gym. We'll put the high school on one side, the middle school on the other side, sit with your first period teachers, everybody, figure out who's here, make a list, write it on paper of who's not here. We had 4 or 5 kind of central office and secretaries, like, actually sitting in a circle on the floor in the middle of the gym with their cell phones. And they start calling to figure out, because a lot of kids didn't come back in. They were picked up by grandma or grandpa or mom and dad. So we're doing all this accountability. We're getting people in there. I'm getting phone calls. And my answer would be, yes, we've had a shooting. We have one student who's injured. It's not your son, or it's not your daughter, just to reassure them. And then usually it was, please don't come to school. We've got kids. We're going to get, because everybody wanted to come. So we definitely had that. Law enforcement, first responders were amazing. I hear other stories from other schools where people are stepping on each other's toes, and we didn't have that at all. but I think really what set the tone for our community, I can remember, I was in the gym. I sent a text to Ryan Cole. I said, Ryan, I don't want to bother you. I'm not going to call you, but I've got students and teachers in the gym, and many are praying. If you get a chance, just give me an update. Let me know how Logan's doing. He called me immediately. So this is probably an hour after he left in the squad. Ryan called me immediately and said, "Hey, Greg, thank you. Quick update. They've taken Logan to Bell Fountain. They're transporting him on to Columbus. It's critical, but he's still alive."
Right.
I said, "What can we pray for?" And he said, just safe travels as they get there. He said, right now they already know that the biggest concern is infection, because when it's a shotgun, it's all those pellets are entering your body. They're all picking up bacteria along the way. So, we're worried about infection, and there's worried about heart and spinal column. He said, but Greg, please tell them to also pray for the other student's family, the shooter's family. And, that set the tone. And I shared that with our kids, because there was empathy right away. And when you talk about that small family, yeah, we were all close to Logan, but we were close to the other family too.
Right.
The boy that had brought the gun to school with the shooter had a sister who was a freshman. She was actually in the she ran with the other students. She didn't know it was happening.
Right.
And so I can remember, once, the one teacher actually, called me and said, "Hey, I understand who the victim was, who the shooter was." I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, his sister's here in this house with me. What should we do?" And I said, let a deputy know. So,
Right.
there are connections with both families, and we don't have a villain. We don't have a villain in this situation. Yes, we have a shooter who did something horrible, but that's another family that we still want to
Right.
support through all of this.
Right. Well, and I remember calling Crystal that day, and I think I went to your house a couple days after, and that was what you were both saying at the time. You were saying we are not angry. We want this shooter. We want him to get the help. We're so sad and sorry for his family. And that, when I hear you say that, when I hear that that's what Ryan Cole's words were, I've never gotten emotional on a podcast before, but I just think about the grace given. And I know there was also anger there, let's not sugarcoat it. And there were a lot of people in your family or in your community that were so angry because this school that they thought was the safest place no longer was. And so there was anger at that shooter. And so that's fair too. But, the community's instinct, your family, and I do believe this is leadership, Greg. I think this is who you are as a human. It's who your family is. It's who the Coles are, to say, let's not make a victim here. Because everyone's a victim, and let's give that grace.
Right. I would say,
go
Jen, kind of the one thing that I learned about myself during this, that is my first instinct as a leader was, I've got to put on this face of strength, because that's what our community needs. We decided, it happened on a Friday morning, obviously canceled school for the rest of that day. We canceled our events for that weekend. We decided to cancel school on Monday. We actually had a junior high girls basketball game scheduled for Monday night at home, and the boys were supposed to play away. We canceled the boys game, which my son was a seventh grader. He was really mad that he didn't get to play his basketball game. But we kept the girls basketball game on schedule, and we scheduled an open house for that night so that parents could bring their kids into school, walk through the building, teachers could be there. And that it ended up being one of the best decisions we made. Instead of saying, come into school the next day, we're in session, for kids to be able to come in with their parents. I kind of felt bad for those junior high girls because they played in front of the largest crowd they've ever played in front of. But it was a chance for the community to heal. And there were, like I said, there were angry parents. They had lots of questions about how are you going to guarantee my kid's safety tomorrow and that sort of thing. And then we had school on Tuesday. and I really praised our kids for being so resilient. You guys, you did everything right on Friday.
Yep.
And some of the stories about kids who were helping, like forcing teachers, no, sir, you're coming with us.
Right.
Just some amazing stories of heroic kids and things that they did. And so I praised our students for being strong, for being resilient, for being brave, for being courageous, all those things. And not just on day one, but I really felt like I had to put on that face of, you know what, we're Tiger strong.
Right.
We're going to come out of this stronger than what we were when we went into it. We're never going to say this was a good thing, but we can be a stronger, closer community afterwards.
Right.
And it was okay to have that message, but it took me a little while to realize, like, I'm putting on a mask and not showing my vulnerability and not showing my struggles. That's pretty much what all of our students and teachers were doing too.
Right.
And it really became apparent from talking to some parents that students felt like they had to put that mask on at school. And then when they would go home and suffer alone,
Right.
and suffer in
Right.
silence. And that's where it took a month or two before, I realized, like, we've got kids who are having nightmares. We have kids that
Right.
won't go out in public, or any room they go into, they sit next to the door.
Right.
Or they immediately scan the room for other exits and windows. Like, that's how the trauma showed itself in the lives of those students. I would say for the rest of that year, the 16-17 school year, we got so much love and attention and so much support that we kind of made it through that okay. And it was really coming back for the following year where it got really, really hard for our students.
Interesting.
And so I looked for ways with my staff and with students to say, hey, let me tell you about some of the things I'm struggling with.
Right.
And it's okay if you're struggling as well. The state attorney general's office had a great victim assistance program to help cover any cost of counseling and therapy. And so, getting that out to kids and parents and teachers, and getting that out to the community, that if you need to talk to somebody, here are some things that you can. But I'd say that's a regret, but that's something I learned about myself. And that's something I try to advise other principals. Like, it's important to be authentic as you
Right.
as you lead. And that means, yes, show strength, but it also means show vulnerability too.
Right. Right. And I think you mentioned it earlier. It takes time to understand the depth of trauma. And, you and I have talked before about how you line up 100 kids, you're going to get about 200 different responses to this, because there's the initial response and then there's the long-term response. And I know you saw
And
that.
all of those responses are appropriate. That's the thing I'll
Absolutely.
emphasize, because we realized right away teachers were trying to grade their own response or judge their own response, and would look at kids, and some kids were responding this way, and like, well, what's wrong with this person? Why are they not feeling that?
Right.
And we had an expert who came in from Geauga County who had experience with the Chardon High School shooting and the aftermath. And she was great with our staff. She basically said, these are all appropriate responses to trauma. They're also, so accept yourself, accept your colleague, accept your student for where they are, because we all have a different timeline,
Right.
and they're all appropriate timeline.
That's right. That's right. And that's why and this is what I love that you did with this horrific event, is that formation of the NASSP Principal Recovery Network. And, just the formation of it is a testament to the need for support among school leaders. And, it's horrible we have to say that, but talk to us about the creation of that network and how that either helped you or hindered your own healing journey. And I know you never heal completely from something like this, but tell us about that, giving back to other principals and how it impacted you.
Yeah. Well, I like it that you said that healing journey, because it is a journey. That's one thing that I try to emphasize, that recovery is a process. There's no destination. You're never recovered, but you're recovering, and we're all somewhere along that process. But like I said, during the immediate aftermath of our shooting, we had administrators from other schools that reached out. Middletown, Madison, down between Dayton and Cincinnati. The superintendent there is the one who really gave us the advice about doing the open house the night before our kids returned. And like I said, Chardon High School, the principal and the assistant principal reached out and talked to myself and other administrators. And so Frank DeAngelis was the principal at Columbine High School during their shooting, and he reached out to us.
Wow.
And so there was that informal reach out from principals to other principals. And I would say, I had an opportunity a year after our shooting. There's a shooting in Marshall County, Kentucky. And I reached out to that principal, just said, hey, a year ago we had a shooting. So if there's anything I can do to help. So those types of things happened. Well, towards the end of 2018, I actually got an email, and it came from Frank DeAngelis and Greg Waples, who works for NASSP, and it came from them together. And it was Frank just saying, hey, we're part of a club that nobody wants to be a part of. We've experienced a shooting as a school principal. NASSP would like to see if there's an interest in getting some of us together, just to see is there anything we can do to support each other and to support other principals. And so, and myself and our assistant principal, Andy, we both said, yeah, we're in, we're willing. So it was actually the spring of the following year. So the spring of 2019, after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas had happened, that we got together, and we got together in DC. There were about 22 of us. And we kind of went in with no agenda at all, but let's get together and talk. And it was interesting. The start was just, it was just odd. Like, you've got these people that you don't know, and we've all experienced something similar, but yet they're pretty different. And I'll admit, like, for me, I didn't feel like we belonged, because you've got the principal from Columbine, the principal from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, principals who had multiple fatalities there that was on the news for not just a day or two, but for weeks and months. And like, they had to lead their schools through these huge traumatic events. And I kind of felt like we didn't belong because we didn't even have a fatality. Like, is this really and Frank DeAngelis said early on, he's like, listen, trauma's trauma. We don't compare trauma. Right. We don't measure trauma. He said, yeah, some schools had to deal with the grief of a fatality. Your school didn't, but your kids still experienced the trauma of a school shooting. Right. So as we were talking, I can remember the one question came up on self-care, like, hey, what do you guys do for self-care? And it was quiet.
Right.
And I'm usually one that will talk. So I'm looking around the room at everybody's avoiding eye contact. And I speak up and I said, who has time for self-care? Right. Like, as a principal, my job was busy already. In the 2.5 years since our shooting, I couldn't be busier. I don't have time to take care of myself. And that's when, like, the head nods and the agreement. And we all agreed that no, we haven't. And then as we talked more, some of the more experienced principals who, it happened further down the road, started talking about some of the effects of not getting help, like marriages that fell apart, and principals that had to leave their school because they couldn't continue there. And that made a difference for me to hear that. And so anyway, that group quickly decided, hey, we want to support each other. We want to support that next principal. It'd be great if there wasn't a next principal, but there probably will be. We want to be able to reach out and support that next principal. But by doing that, we're only reacting to school violence, and that's not enough. So how can we be proactive? What can we do to make a difference? And we decided that means using our voice and advocating for school safety at the state and at the federal level, especially with our congressmen. So we've done a lot of that. The other thing that we did is we decided, like, no principal that experiences a shooting has time to take a phone call and talk for an hour. No principal has time to look through a manual that tells you how to best respond. But we did say, what would have been helpful to me is if I would have had some resource that I could go to that kind of just gives me the highlights of things to expect and how you might want to think about. So we developed a guide to recovery that I think we're all proud of, because it kind of takes all of our experiences and puts it together in a 7-page brochure, pamphlet, whatever you want to call it, that you could have sitting on your desk. And our goal is let's get that on as many principals' desks now. We don't want to wait until after a shooting. Get it now so that and it just talks about things like that you need to be prepared for. You know, a lot of
Right.
the focus is on listening to student voice, and that's something our school counselor did a fantastic job of, is sitting down with students before we even returned to school to find out what their fears were, what their
Mm,
concerns were.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's something that the Principal Recovery Network, and you know, it's been 6 years, and
Yeah.
we still get together once or twice a year. We do quarterly Zoom meetings. We reach out to the next school when it happens. We support each other. We've become more than just colleagues. We've become a pretty tight knit family of principals who can relate to each other because of what we've
Right.
experienced.
Right. Right. And as you were talking and you mentioned, some principals had to leave. I've always been so blown away by your strength. Never once, Greg, did I hear you say, I'm going to have to leave this building. And you were the guy that went in the restroom. You were first in. You never wavered in your commitment to your community. And I think too about your family, your personal life. And, I know you and Crystal are stronger than ever. How did your family, all whom in that building, navigate that recovery process together? And also, how's Logan?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say we all navigated it differently, and not great in some
Yeah.
cases. And there were some challenges of, boy, dad is the face of the school right now, and he's going to be
Right.
strong, and so I better be also. So,
Right.
when we found out later, like some kid, as our children shared as they got older, like there was some time of just dealing with it in silence, in
Right.
on your own, and I've got some regrets there too. Like, I went into school leader mode that day, and I didn't think I need to go find my seventh grade son just to let him know I'm okay,
Right.
and because I knew he was okay, but
Right.
he didn't know I was.
I
Um,
see. Yeah.
Luckily, our fourth grade daughter was in Crystal's class. She was
Right.
in my wife's classroom. So I remember I didn't get to see our oldest. I didn't get to see Addie till the prayer vigil that night at about 8 p.m. And so I think we all navigated it
Differently.
differently.
Yeah.
And in some cases, probably not well.
Right.
For me, it took me about a year and a half before I started going to counseling. I was sitting
Right.
around a table at school. Our counselor asked how we were doing. I said, I think I'm doing pretty good. And she said, really? I said, yeah, yeah. She said, well, Greg, you're not the principal you used to be.
Ugh.
I said, I know, but that's to be expected. She said, Greg, I don't think you understand. We need the best of you right now because
Ugh.
we're all struggling, and
Right.
you're not at your best. She said,
Right.
why don't you go talk to somebody? I said, well, I don't think it's that bad. And she kind of said, well, do you have so little respect for our profession as counselors that it's
Oh.
only for certain people? I mean, how bad does it have to be? I said,
Yeah. It's a
that's a
great.
fair observation. Give me a list of people and I'll go talk to somebody. So I started going to counseling.
Right.
And what I found is that, and he was right. Like, I dealt with the event in a logical way. How can I quickly make this make sense and move on? And I
Yes.
never dealt with it emotionally.
Right.
And I never looked at myself as a victim of trauma. I only looked at as our students as
Right. Right.
victims of trauma. So I had to work through that.
Right.
I think for our students, especially the ones that graduated in 4 months, those are the ones that didn't have the support network around them the next year, and that was a struggle.
Right.
I
Right.
think for my daughter, who was a sophomore, she would say the rest of the sophomore year, we were so as a school, we were celebrities. We would go to Fairbanks for a game, and they would make it all about us. They'd have
Mhm.
banners, they'd have bake sales, they would do everybody support the Tigers, Tiger Strong.
Right.
And it was coming back year two when you should be back to normal that you're not.
Yeah.
That got kind of challenging.
Sure.
I think the other thing that helped us was, the first day back, I was able to share a video from Logan, a message from Logan from his hospital bed. He was able to say, hey guys, just want you to know I'm okay. I'm thinking about you. I'm looking forward to coming back to school. And that was very powerful for our students to get a message from Logan. And I can't imagine the kind of pressure he was under. He became a celebrity immediately. Like, he was
Mhm.
the hero of the school. Not only did he walk in and unintentionally change the outcome, but then he talked a shooter into not continuing.
Right.
So Logan returned about 3 weeks later. He came back to school, and that made a huge difference for us. That fall, he was a starter on the soccer team. Like, he was right back for his senior year, playing soccer. He went off to Cedarville after graduating high school. And our oldest, Addie, went off to Ohio State. She was a year younger. And I can remember, COVID hit and the world changed and everybody had to go home from college. So when they were home from college, both moms got a little involved. Like, hey, is Logan dating anybody? No. Is Addie dating anybody? No. Maybe they should. So Logan took the initiative and asked Addie if she would be interested in a socially distanced date. She suggested maybe they should take a walk around our family farm. A couple months later, they're dating. A couple years later, they're married. So yeah, Logan and Addie have been married for 3 years now, and just another. I think our story resonates well because it's a story of a school shooting that didn't end in a fatality. I don't say it had a happy ending, but it had a positive ending in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so I think as we speak and share, I think that helps it resonate. And then when you also find out, wait, the principal's daughter married the boy who was injured.
Right.
Like, how's that happen?
Right.
That should be a movie.
Well, it should be a movie. And the thing that's so compelling to me, I mean, I wish our listeners could know your family, your goodness, your kindness, your, yes, your logical response to problems, your faith, all of those things that come together to make you so strong and so much to be admired. And the love that Addie and Logan have, it shows that you can move forward. Not only that day in the restroom when Logan had just taken bullets and he's saying, you haven't killed anybody, you can stop, to now they're a family. And Addie's an educator. She's a speech language therapist in a nearby district. So, as a family, continuing to give back to children, even in the wake of trauma, is just an incredible story, Greg. It really is.
Well, and that's something that was encouraging to me, is the number of students who were in the high school during the shooting who did decide to become educators. I was a little worried that it would be the opposite, but I think the one thing I kept hearing from my students afterwards was, I had no idea my teachers cared this much about me.
Yeah.
And I think they saw, not only did they see their community rally around, but they saw that their teachers as more than just teachers. They saw the human side of teachers.
Right.
And they saw the difference that teachers can make. And I've really kind of made it a mission the last 4 or 5 years of promoting the profession of education, because I don't think there's another profession like it. And we need good, strong, intelligent, service-oriented people to go into education. So every time I get a chance in front of my students, I encourage them to follow their passion, but as they're following their passion, keep education in the back of their mind, because sometimes people make a change during college. Sometimes it's a career change later on. But I always say I'm looking out at a lot of really, really great potential teachers. So I'm encouraged that a lot of our students still went into education. As I look at my 3 kids, like I said, our oldest is a speech therapist in Marysville. Our middle will be a senior at Ohio State, majoring in social studies education. Our youngest will be a freshman at Ohio State, majoring in elementary ed, with the goal of being an occupational therapist. So I would love it if they were choosing other professions too. But I'm grateful and proud that they're choosing education as a career.
Right. I think your son just got a student teaching assignment, right? And this is, I mean, what a wonderful legacy. And again, pointing to the leadership you provided and the strength of your wife, that all 3 of your children will likely be in a school setting someday. It's just incredible. So, Greg, this has been, like I said earlier, every time I hear this story, I get emotional, and I am just blown away by the experience that you have to share with others. And so, for our listeners, Greg is an incredible speaker. If you ever want him to come, hire him to come and speak to your teachers or your community or whatever, definitely reach out. We'll have his contact information in the show notes. And Greg, thank you so much for your time. I truly, truly thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. And I guess just the last thing for the listeners, like, if there's a principal out there who's experienced a shooting in their building, I think sometimes those principals are hesitant to maybe to reach out to the Principal Recovery Network, or to respond to our reach out, or maybe it's been several years. But I know for me and for the others that I've worked with, we've just found so much benefit in able to talk to somebody else who's been in those shoes. So I would encourage, for your listeners, and if they know a principal who's had that experience, just to, reach out, go to the NASSP website, and you can go to the Principal Recovery Network. But you don't have to take a role where you're out speaking about it or anything. We really focus those informal relationships of just building each other up and being able to listen to each other. So that's why we formed the network, and that's why we still operate.
Well, and shout out to NASSP for being brave enough to do that and bring you all together. And I know now with your work with the board of directors, you were very, very active in the conference too. And so just to bring that empathetic, compassionate, come one, come all mindset, I think that's what makes NASSP so special. So thank you, Dr. Johnson, so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williambparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.